Each time I attend a workshop, I'm amazed at what I learn. Finding the time to commit to attend a 2 or 3 day event is the only drawback. Speculating that many of you might have the same time constraints, I decided to bring a workshop to you, a Serger workshop. If you have a Serger or would like to own one, consider this 3-part series a workshop that you can take at your convenience. Pam Maschey, Baby Lock's educational ambassador, is a master at teaching Serger workshops. She's my co-presenter during this series, and Pam, Sergers are not just for that overlock stitch we did in the first program.
Certainly not, but with a few minor adjustments, we can make a very decorative narrow rolled hem, which is what we're going to share with you today. Using this stitch to add a narrow decorative hem during this workshop lesson will encourage you to experiment with threads, giving you more creative options.
Serger Workshop, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing Designs and Class A Needles.
During the first course of our Serger workshop, Pam and I detailed working with a 4-thread overlock stitch and 3-thread. And the rolled edge, the rolled hem stitch, is a variation of the theme. Using 3 threads for a fine narrow finish, here we have the heavier thread as a decorative event. This is a 6-weight thread, or the narrower, the lighter weight one is just rayon thread placed in the looper, the upper looper. Now, if you missed the introduction to serger parts, and if you don't have a serger, Pam, the loopers, upper and lower loopers, are kind of terminology that isn't new to some, but maybe to others.
And it is different than our conventional sewing machine. So let's just take a quick look at that. Again, inside of our machine, we're going to be working with, as Nancy referenced, the loopers. Now, there are 2 of those loopers that we're working with when we do the narrow rolled hem. The upper looper, which is going to travel above or on the upper side of our fabric, and then the lower looper, which is going to be positioned below the machine, as well as staying below the surface of your fabric. And then, of course, we have the needle, and we are going to be placing the decorative thread in our upper looper, because there again, that's the thread that's going to be seen with the narrow rolled hem.
So you're going to check your owner's manual for the settings. Pam's machine has automatic tension settings. She just changed a lever position, and she has a rolled edge. And Pam, that lever position is on the side.
It's right here on the side.
And I have a manual settings to work with my machine. I have tension dials or thread guide dials on the outside. Needle, left needle, right needle, upper looper, lower looper, and I've already adjusted some of these, and I'm going to talk about adjusting those as we go along. But I'm going to talk first about the thread that I have. I have a texturized nylon, sometimes called woolly fabric, woolly nylon, woolly texture, whatever you want to call it. It's used for swimwear, lightweight fabric. It's fluffier. It fills out the stitch. But because it's fluffy, if you have an automatic threading system, it's sometimes difficult to get through the loopers. You can see that fuzziness. So what we like to do is create a lasso, cut about 1 yard of thread, and just traditional all-purpose thread, and kind of meet the ends together. And honestly, you gotta lick them together to keep them together. And then I'm going to close the threading ports. And this is going to go through the lower looper. I'll put about 1 inch of thread through the lower looper and hold on to the loop end of the thread. There's a lever to push, and I pushed it, and then the ends come out through the lower looper. I'll just take the texturized nylon thread, put it through the lasso, and pull it through. And my, that's fast. And that way it goes through so easily. So you follow the, if you are manually threading your machine, follow the guide. Usually it's the upper looper, lower looper, and then the needle. And now for the settings. If you don't have automatic settings, you're going to be loosening the upper looper. And the reason for this, on this edge, you'd like the fabric, or the thread I should say, to wrap around the edge. So you want to have it loosened so that it has plenty of slack. The lower looper sometimes has to be tightened just a touch. But you'll have to experiment with it. And Pam, let's see what I have here.
Okay.
I think first of all though, I better open my threading ports. And maybe you can tell our viewers about the stitch length.
Certainly. Now the stitch length dial, again, what we're going to do, and as you can see on Nancy's sample, we want to have the stitches fairly close together. On the sample we looked at previously, you noticed that the stitch, depending upon the weight of the thread that you were working with, certainly would give you a different effect. But I do want to show everyone where the stitches are formed, because it is formed on the needle plate itself. And when we form and make the narrow rolled hem, we're just simply going to disengage that outside stitch former. And of course, your presser foot would stay on the machine when you would do this, but I just wanted you to see where that stitch was formed. Our stitch length is also going to be set at a fairly short stitch setting.
Now in some older sergers, you may have a separate foot that's for rolled hemming, where the stitch finger's on the foot.
On the foot
But
itself.
most newer machines have it right on the plate.
Right on the plate. Now Nancy, when she was stitching, she just stitched right on the edge of her fabric. And sometimes the fabrics, and that's typically how you would stitch, was be right on the edge of your fabric. But some of the fabrics are going to be kind of difficult because they roll, the fabric is rolling over the edge. And if your fabric does not roll easily, you could use a narrow strip of the water-soluble stabilizer and just simply place that right on top of your fabric and stitch.
Now usually this water-soluble stabilizer is by the yard. You're just going to cut it into strips, and that's what Pam's going to serge right over.
Right, and you can, when you put your settings in action, also engage your cutting blade, because the cutting blade, you want to just trim off the excess edge of your fabric. And I'm just going to increase my stitch length as I stitch so you can see the various lengths. All right, so once we have our stitching completed, it would be very easy then to just simply tear off that excess water-soluble stabilizer.
And there you have options of working with a rolled hem, whether working with texturized nylon, rayon, or a very decorative thread. You have many options and can work on a lot of different fabrics. We showcased the elastic foot during the first episode, but there's more to this accessory foot than only using it to apply elastic. Serge over fishing line, yes, fishing line for an elegant rolled hem finish for bridal wear. You just saw a close-up of the sample, and the reason we're using fishing line is to give that edge a little extra buoyancy, a little extra weight and shape. If you're going to be working with ruffles or bridal veiling or shears, Pam, this is just an ideal weight to give, or feature to give that edge different additional weight. Now, fishing line. Granted, it's not usually found in a sewing accessory area, but this is 10-pound line. So rather than catching a white bass or a walleye or whatever you may catch with 10 pounds, it works great for inserting in the elastic foot. Now, if you were with us during the first episode when we worked with the elastic foot, Pam showed us how to apply elastic over an edge. We're not going to adjust the tension to hold the elastic into place, but rather work with the two openings. There are two of them, one in the front and one near the needle that will thread the fishing line through. This is cording just to show you a contrast, but Pam, why don't you just show that in detail?
Okay, as you said, Nancy, we are going to be inserting the fish line into the two openings that are on the foot. And what this foot does then is holds the fish line to the right side of the needle. And again, you can use a variety of weights of test of fish line depending upon the weight of your fabric or whatever your tackle box might allow you to use. So we're simply just going to serge. Lower the presser foot and stitch right on the edge of our fabric. Now what I'm doing is I am going to be stitching on the bias edge of our fabric because many times your ruffles are going to be cut on a bias edge, and if you then pull on the fish line, as you said, it gives it that extra buoyancy, but it's also going to flute the edge of your ruffle.
And we used the rolled edge. We didn't change any settings. We left the settings for a narrow rolled edge stitch.
Correct.
And moved the needle into the right position. Pam had the needle in the left position in our last segment, but here's the narrow rolled edge with heavier thread in the upper looper, decorative thread, and just that fishing line passed through those two openings on the elastic foot. And you also mentioned you can change the weight.
Correct. Change the weight of your fish line, again, depending upon the weight of your fabric and the buoyancy that you want for the edge.
So add a new notion to your accessory box, making it fish line for serging. A flat lock stitch is a modified overlock stitch that lies flat on the surface of the fabric when pulled. Embellishing creative projects is its forte. This stitch is where you get two for the price of one. Two unique looks. The ladder stitch and the serpentine stitch. The ladder stitch is the visible needle thread, the serpentine, the visible lower looper. We're using a two-thread flat lock stitch. Now, if this terminology is a little foreign to you, not to worry. In most books it's detailed. In the workshop book that accompanies this program, it will be explained. But the needle thread is lightweight in color, and this is a lightweight look. And then the lower looper, not the upper looper, the lower looper thread is what you see in the serpentine look. And it's in the middle of the fabric, Pam, and you're not going to be sewing on the edge any longer.
No, we're not. We're actually moving into the middle of our fabric, and we're not going to be cutting our fabric this time.
So the setup is quite different.
So the setup is quite different. So let's just take a look at that. And as you referenced, we are going to be working with the lower looper and one needle. We can either use the left or the right needle, depending upon the width of the stitch that we're wanting, but because we are using a heavy thread in our lower looper, we want to use the widest stitch possible.
And this is a great trim technique, adding trim in the middle of the fabric, maybe for heirloom sewing, almost could look like pin tucks.
Sure. And also joining fabrics together.
Sure.
If you want to expand the fabric, or if you are a quilter and you want to add your batting pieces back together and expand the size of your batting again. So let's just take a look at our setup for just a minute. So again, we are going to be using our lower looper and one needle. Because we have the automatic threading and also automatic tension system, we are threading in a little different sequence. So we are going to be threading through both of our upper and our lower looper thread ports.
But if you have automatic threading, your manual will tell you this.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Always refer to your owner's manual. So now as we come through the machine, it is important that when we set up for the two-thread flat lock stitch, that you engage the subsidiary looper, as it's technically called, but it's actually a guide that pops into the upper looper arm, and as I'm going to turn this, you'll be able to see what it does is it really kind of tricks the thread and pushes it back up to the needle. Because it is the lower looper thread, it intersects then with the needle to form the stitch.
And you have to make certain, which happened to me a couple of times, that your thread does not get in the looper before you click it.
Click it in place. That's right. Make sure that the lower looper thread is outside of the upper looper before you engage that. Okay, so let's go ahead and just show you what that stitch is going to look like. Now, as you referred to, you have both a serpentine stitch and a ladder stitch, 2 for 1 in this one setup. So if you are wanting to have the serpentine stitch showing on the outside, we will be folding the wrong side of our fabric together. And I'm referencing this on this shiny piece of fabric. The shiny is the outside, and the duller side of the fabric is going to be the wrong side.
I call it the other right side.
The other right side fabric.
Yes.
That's perfect. So we are folding the other right side or the wrong side together, and the serpentine stitch will show. When we want to have the needle thread or the ladder stitch show, we place right sides together. Okay?
And you have disengaged the blade.
Yes, we have. We
So
have
You can do that on your serger, just not have it work.
not have it work. That's right. Turn it out of the way so it's not going to cut. Even if it does skim the edge of your fabric slightly, it is okay because it is going to be covering the edge with the looper stitches. Now the stitch, when you work with, typically with your serging, you want those loops to always face right along the edge. But we are going to look at our stitch, and it's going to look a little bit more messy because we want the loops to hang off the edge so our fabric lays flat.
So you're guiding it away from the blade area.
Correct. And having some of those loops hang off the edge. Many times you will find that the presser foot has markings that are on the front. And when you reference those markings, because those are where your needles are positioned, you can also guide your fabric in. Now, as you can see, there are loops hanging off the edge of the fabric. And what we're simply going to do is open the fabric, give it a little wiggle or a tug, and when it opens up, it lays completely flat.
Now that's a serpentine, but if on the reverse side,
On the reverse side, there you go, we have our needle.
so depends upon, of course, which you would like as your outside. The dull side, the shiny side, the right side, the other right side, doesn't matter, but you can get 2 looks, very distinct looks, by choosing specific threads and choosing which sides you're sewing on. You've just seen that the stitches of a flat lock provide artistic options. Now learn how to add ribbons or serge on trim with a flat lock stitch. This stitch, as long as you have it set up, make a small sample using the right needle. And we're going to start with the sample you just saw by flat locking lace onto an edge on a hem area, on bridal wear, heirloom sewing. You may find many options to use this. And Pam, you've switched the needles.
We've just simply moved the needle from the left sewing position, which gave us that wide decorative stitch, now to the right side. And we didn't really have to make any other adjustments besides moving the needle. We are going to be using a piece of lace and a piece of linen on this sample. And we've placed a piece of fusible tricot interfacing on the back side just to support the fabric so that it doesn't pull off the edge, because there are only 2 threads that are there to hold the lace in place. Placing it on the wrong side, we're just again going to simply serge with a few of the loops hanging off the edge.
And that's important to guide it away from that blade area.
Right. And again, even if you have the blade engaged and it does trim off just a little bit, it will still be okay. Your lace might be a little bit narrower. Okay, so there we have the stitching, and just very gently now pull this apart. And your lace is attached. And this could be on, again, heirloom sewing for lingerie, slips, or nightgowns if you want a very flat seam.
Another flat seam area that you may want to consider is working with ribbon, attaching ribbon along the edges. Instead of straight stitching, you can add a little additional trim along the edge. You can see this thread we've changed back to that heavier weight of thread, but Pam, for time's sake, we're just going to use the all-purpose serger.
The all-purpose serger thread, and that could also be very decorative, shortening your stitch length as well. Here we've used a paper glue stick and just simply glued our ribbon down in place, and that makes it very easy then to just fold right on the very edge. Again, wrong sides together. We're going to serge down both sides of our ribbon. And again, you would serge down both sides. But here, just to show you how this is going to be attached.
Really very nice because it lies flat because the thread loops around the edge. So you've learned today rolled edge, flat lock, how versatile it is, and that's our second program of the workshop. It's been heartwarming to learn how many of you have been sewing and then giving of your talents. The organizations we featured on Nancy's Corner have kept me updated on the number of donations. Thank you. Another nonprofit group that can use our sewing talents is Tender Loving Care Ministries, serving children of the Appalachian areas. Last time on Sewing with Nancy, I introduced you to Carol Franceschi, director and founder of TLC, and she told us about how we can create outfits for little boys and little girls, but there's more, a smaller stitchable project for TLC. Welcome back, Carol, and thank you for sharing with us the things we can sew and create from our fabric stash this time, because they could create a small bag, a care bag. Tell me about this.
Yes. We started making those because when I went down to visit one year, I realized that the children didn't know how to brush their teeth, and they needed just the basic things: shampoo, toothpaste, a comb, little pocket tissues, and what have you. And then I realized, well, they needed something to put them in. So then one of our volunteers came up with this bag, and they can be made of, you know, pretty fabrics for girls and boys. I mean, they can use denim. They can use almost anything that they would like to.
And it's not a very big project. I mean, it can be made in a short time.
Absolutely. And then the children, when of course the products are gone, they can reuse the bag for something for school or whatever, you know.
So on your website, you have a listing of how to create this little bag just with cut 2 pieces of fabric, 12 by 18, and all the instructions from there on down. So it's a fast project, be a great service project for a 4-H or for a Girl Scout group.
Absolutely.
And then you have listed some idea what to include.
Absolutely. And the one thing I would like to add is that would they please use some cording, because I found that that's what holds up the best.
All right. And you know, because you've been doing the TLC for a long time.
Long time.
And service, I asked you last time how many dresses and little outfits you thought had been shipped to the Appalachian area, and you said? Over
the years, literally thousands.
You thought you made 2,000 yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your sewing machine must really be humming.
Yes, it has been. I don't get to sew as much now since I have more of administrative duties. But I do sew a lot of the slips for the little girls. And I have a machine that I bought when my younger son was about 3 years old, and it was used then. And to me, it's still the best machine. Even though I have sergers, of course, I still like my old Singer sewing machine.
Well, good for you. And people who aren't into sewing or quilting could also, if you're knitting or crocheting, you also have projects for them. And
yes, we do.
Knitting projects. I like these little longer cuffed mittens.
Nice bright colors for children. Any color except black.
Okay, and the instructions for these projects are also on your website.
Yes, they are.
So people, if they're interested in sewing or knitting or even crocheting, there's a project for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. They can do as little or as much as they would like to do.
Then, Carol, just as a refresher, you do you ship packages, complete packages. Now the coat goes with you buy coats to go.
We buy coats, and they're shipped and then separately, and then we ship those. So that
they have everything to keep them warm for a cold winter.
Yes.
So you have the 4 times a year, just a refresher, when you send packages?
Yes, we ship 4 times a year. We're doing back to school now. Then we will ship the coats and hat, scarves, and mitten sets for Thanksgiving. And by the way, we buy the coats. So we ask people if they would be able to donate a coat or two. And all that is on the website as well. And then we ship for Christmas because not the same children get for both holidays.
Okay.
There's so many, many children to take care of. And then we do Easter mailing as well.
Well, this is delightful, and there's just so much we can give of ourselves, give of sewing. A little bit of fabric can go a long way.
Yes.
I thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And hopefully a lot of us will be sewing and perhaps knitting and giving to you and to other organizations. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Sewing with Nancy. You can find all things Sewing with Nancy, including information about TLC, by going to our website, nancyzieman.com. When you click on Nancy's Corner under the 2500 series, you'll find information on TLC and all other Nancy's Corner guests. Also on nancyscorner.com, you can watch current Sewing with Nancy programs online. You can rewatch this one if you'd like. You can read my blog, and you can find all things, as I mentioned, Sewing with Nancy. I'd like to thank you for joining me. Thank you, Carol, for being with us. Thank you for being with us on our Serger program. Bye for now.
Nancy and Pam's fully illustrated Serger Workshop workbook includes laminated instructions for all the techniques featured in this 3-part series. It's $19.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the workbook, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2514. Order item number BK2514. Serger Workshop. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzieman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.